afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our second session of the webinar. Joining us is Simon Sankale, Financial Crime Investigating Analyst from BT&T Corporation in the UK. Now, in my few years of practice, I've come across the word forensics so many times on several occasions. What does forensic mean? Mr. Simon Sankale from the UK.
Thank you very much, Tony. Before I define what is forensic investigations, I wish to say that as a financial investigator, I have learned that if you come up with a major list of all crimes that happen in this world, and then you remove from that list the crimes that occur because of passion, or what we call crimes of passion, you only remain with crimes that are committed because of money. It's all about the money. And following the money is what forms the basic of forensic investigations. So forensic investigation, as far as fraud investigations is concerned, or financial investigations is concerned, it is basically the use of science and scientific processes in tandem with the law, and analyzing all this information in a bid to identify the source of a particular crime and in relation to money. Where is the money? Who committed this particular crime or fraud? Following the trace of the money, following the money, who signed the check, digging deep into any trail that you can find is simply forensic investigation, in as far as fraud and financial investigations is concerned.
Understand, in forensic investigations, are there any limitations or other restrictions to forensic investigations? Where do you draw the line when conducting forensic investigations? Mr. Simon.
Thanks, Tony. In as far as conducting forensic investigations, of course, there are limitations, and we are guided by the law. In as far as conducting forensic investigations in the corporate world, we must also, as investigators, be guided by the law. And we are limited by what the law says. If you intrude into someone's privacy to gather information, or you conduct a search without probably a search order when engaging external parties, for example, the police, then we are limited to presenting that particular evidence that we shall gather during that particular period. We cannot present that evidence in court. It will be dismissed by the magistrates or the jury. So therefore, we are limited by the law as far as conducting forensic investigations is concerned, and also limitations by the scope of our investigations.
Conducting investigations, whether forensic or otherwise, you have to be bound and guided by the law of that particular country which you are in. Right, Mr. Simon, if I'm not wrong?
Exactly, that is what I mean. And simply these are what we as financial investigators refer to as the rules of the game. If you're conducting a particular investigation, you must abide by the rules of the game. And these rules of the game are what the law says. What does the law say in collecting this particular evidence? What does the law require me as an investigator to do so that my evidence will be admissible in court? An investigator must conduct investigations with prosecution in mind. If I am doing this to establish this, I must take someone to court. I must take someone to maybe a panel, or if it is internal corporate investigations, disciplinary committees. Then an investigator, when conducting these particular investigations and collecting evidence, must be prosecution-led and guided in his or her mind. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Eric Onyango, do you have anything to say about the rules of the game?
Thank you, Shalima. Yes, you can add something. The other rule of the game is that because this is science, and in forensics as well, there are so many disciplines under that. So taking the right discipline to the investigation is also a key thing. Remember, when I started, I said that you assemble a team before you start your investigation. So because we know there is a forensic pathology, which does not necessarily now apply in fraud, we'll go for the very, very relevant expertise. Also scope will matter, because today if we are to come do a document examination, a forensic document examination, in that process of constituting a team, you look for an expert who is relevant to the document examination. If it is to comment on figures, you would also look for the forensic accountant. If there is a digital environment that you need to collect evidence from, then you will also look for the digital forensics. So scope is also a role of the game.
Okay, I believe now we are on the same page, taking into account that we've all agreed that investigators, while conducting the investigation process, they have to comply with the law. So, Mr. Simon Sankale from the UK, what do you mind elaborating to us, or rather explaining to us, what are the repercussions if an investigator decides not to comply with the law?
Thanks, Shalima. If an investigator fails to follow the rules of the game, or what we are calling the law, this investigation faces particular risks. One of them being failing to prosecute that particular case in court. If it relates to a fraud, an internal fraud in an institution that has criminal elements, at some point you will involve the police, who are mandated by the law to prosecute this case in court. You will liaise with them. Therefore, if you do not follow the rules of the game or the law, you first of all face a risk of this prosecution falling, or this case falling, once it goes to court. Number two, you also fail or have a risk of conducting appropriate and measurable asset recovery. For example, if you're conducting an investigation internally to establish how much money have we lost in this particular scheme that has been orchestrated by internal staff, then you bungle the case without following the rules. Then at some point, once you start recovering the recovery process, then you find that it is very difficult for you as an investigator, because you did not follow the rules, to constitute an amount that is recoverable and to actually recover that particular amount. Another risk that you face as an investigator, if you do not follow the rules of the game, is the risk of actually tarnishing the name and the name of the investigators or the team that is dealing with that particular case, because it shows that you are very incompetent, you cannot be relied on. And of course, this is a bad picture and image towards the institution, and particularly towards your department. Therefore, you must conduct these investigations professionally, within the rules of the game, and well guided by the law. That is what I think for now is some of the negative consequences that we face as investigators when conducting these particular financial investigations without following the rules of the game. Probably the panelists can add a few of them, which I believe I have left out.
Okay, thank you, Salima. Let me just add something based on how the rule. Let me just expand based on the rule, but on a digital environment, the way Erika said, we have also the digital environment plus name. So yes, I agree. But again, people can ask, or maybe any other audience may ask that, how is the, at what time can you say that this investigation is successful? Yes. So for an investigation to be successful, it doesn't matter that you must find, for example, if maybe people are alleging that the X is the victim, first of all, you'll have to justify and prove that it is X or it is X who is the victim. But again, so long as you follow the procedure, due diligence, and also you follow the methodology aspect, and also you use the tools which are standard based on the measurement, and you come up with a report. Either maybe the receiver may accept it. At the same time, the receiver may have some recommendations, or maybe some not recommendations, but view. So for a successful report, for you to say that you have an investigation report is successful, it is not necessary that you must get a suspect. Yes, sometimes you may just come up with the loopholes and also some of the areas which was used to come up with that. So when you are coming up with the findings, your finding is what determines you are successful in terms of the report. I'm bringing this because most people are always maybe have the view that for you to have a successful report investigation, if it is Mike, maybe you must say this is Mike, this is the successful. Yes, most of them find yes, but maybe a percentage might just maybe come up, might just identify the loopholes and the vulnerabilities which was used to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. So as we've all heard that the same consequences that will be suffered by a normal citizen whom fraud has been proved against are the same consequences that will be suffered by an investigator who did not follow the rules of the game.
Can I add something?
Yes, Mr. Simon.
Just briefly. Number one, my namesake Simon is called like me.
Yes.
He called them the rules of the game.
He called them the rules of the game. Yes.
Yes. Number one, I always tell investigators, any investigation you are doing, assume it will end before a court of law. Gather evidence forensically, as if it is going to end up in a court of law, because chances are it will end up there.
And when it ends up in court, then sufficient evidence and documentation will have to be furnished.
I normally say it has to stand on its feet.
It has to stand on its feet.
You don't have to
yes,
take a crippled case, you are supporting it.
Yes.
Because it is well investigated, evidence corrected is admissible in court. Even if it is challenged, then the person challenging it, the defense, will have a hard time doing so.
If that person has an easy time, then it will be sort of embarrassing to the person who investigated the whole matter in the first place, right?
Yeah, often the investigators,
that means you didn't do your job right.
Yeah, you're a lawyer and
supposed to.
Yeah, you know how investigators are harassed in the docket
yes,
in the dock
I understand.
Yeah, it's not normally a very interesting thing. Number two, on the consequences, I would want to add one to the organization,
yes,
in whose behalf you're conducting investigations for. It can be sued for dismissing an employee without following the due procedure, without following the law, especially if the investigation was shambolic and its outcome was used to make a decision to terminate somebody's employment. You will be taken to the court of, we call it environment and labor, and you will be told to compensate. Say the person may be asking for the next 10 months, pay them before they get another job or whatever. You know what the judge will do there. So you will end up losing more money in addition to what you lost, courtesy of a shambolic investigation.
Proper investigations, Mr. Simon, that is well noted. So what approach and expertise do you consider when forming a fraud investigation team? Mr. Eric, Mike, what do you have to say about it?
Thank you, Shalima. I'll repeat what I'd reiterated earlier, that when you receive a request to investigate, or if you are the project lead of an investigation,
the first thing you need to do is form a team.
You form a team. And forming a team is not all about just segregating roles. It should be just like Sankale had said, it should be done by a view of going to court. So if you bring a person who will play a role in the investigation, and the person cannot end up going to court, then I think the investigation will be shambolic. Because when that time reaches, when you're going to court, you will realize that the persons you're having do not merit or are not competent to participate in that process. So it has to look at the right expertise based on the scope and based on the environment that you're looking at. Just like I said, if it is a digital environment, you have to have a strong team in that area. If it has finances, you have to have a competent team that can comment on those figures. If it is interviewing, because somebody can allege harassment, you have to have a competent interviewer or an interrogator in the process, so that at the end of the day, you have the right evidence which is admissible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eric. Mr. Sam, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
An investigation is a resource-intensive process. So the other thing I would look for when forming a team is the resources. Will these people be required to travel? Will I require to buy stationery? Will I be required to buy more resources to meet the objectives of the investigation? Because I could be given a job in Tanzania to go and investigate there. I'll need to deliver the resource there, maybe via an aircraft, by road. Resources could come in many forms.
Yes, Mr. Mike.
Yeah, just to add on that, on what my colleagues experts have said, remember again, in investigation, that there's there's something which you have to have in mind. Some of the questions which you have to ask, like when did it happen? How was it happen? What time was it happen? So it is about WW questions and how. There are many which you have to justify. And again, like what my colleague has said, Simon, in investigation, you have to be very, very prepared in terms of the personnel, which Erika said. The personnel in the sense that if you have a project to handle, and you have also to understand, first of all, you'll be able to understand the terms of reference and also the scope of that. It will even enable you to highlight and also to come up with the personnel whom you know are going to tackle that. At the same time, when you are going to handle an investigation on a far end, for example, from one county to the other, you must also, if it is, for example, a digital forensics, you may have to be ready with any tool, because sometimes you may go there and you realize that maybe the systems they're using are still behind or are advanced. So you must be ready with every tool which you feel that once already there will be no waste of time, but you will be able to tackle all the challenges. Sometimes maybe you go there, but you just have the tools for maybe the Windows systems, you don't have the tools for the Linux, and even realize that they're using the Linux. And that is why when it comes to the communication, which Eric has really emphasized on, you will be able to ask, how many systems, operating systems are you people using? What are some of the machines? What are some of the network environment? So that when you are going, you already have a blueprint of that environment. So it will enable you now to come up with that, with a watertight report. So it is also very, very important to look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. Now shifting to Mr. Simon Sankale from in the UK. Can you please kindly show us the link between the in-house fraud personnel and how it collaborates with the external service providers?
The in-house personnel and the external providers conspiration to defraud the particular company. This mostly is a particular crime that, or fraud that is mostly occurs when internal personnel have conflict of interest, or they conspire with other people who are externally outside of the organization to get a particular benefit in terms of money. By this I mean the internal staff. For example, a good example of internal staff in-house fraudsters are found in the procurement department. Once they engage in particular bid rigging with external suppliers of particular goods, and they tend to meet outside office, have a discussion that we are going to award you this particular tender, and in return, you give us a kickback of this amount of money. So this is mostly prominent in our Kenyan space, whereby internal fraudsters in organizations conspire with external party or external service providers who supplies particular goods and services to their institution, and in return, they award them the tenders and get kickbacks. So this is something that is apparent. Therefore, I believe an institution or a corporate organization must have in place proper internal controls and risk management and mitigation practices, especially in the areas whereby we have been able to identify that this is a risk to organization. This is where fraud is likely to occur. This is where conspiracy between external service providers and our internal staffs is likely to occur. So how do we mitigate this? You're able to identify and come up with mitigation factors and certain things that you might look at and establish that these are particular red flags that you've identified. And there might be a fraud that is happening between party A and our internal staff. Therefore, this is something that must be looked at both internally and externally.
My question is, this information which investigators have furnished the court with, does it have to be solid enough beyond reasonable doubt for that person, for the court to be convinced that there is a case to answer, or does it have to be on a balance of probability? Since fraud is a crime, and a crime is a crime, as Mike had put it, so does it have to be beyond reasonable doubt, or does it have to only be proved on a balance of probability?
Thank you, Shalima. I think I'll begin by saying fraud is a crime. So if it is pursued in the criminal aspect, the threshold should be beyond reasonable doubt. And as an investigator, you need to develop the legal theory when you commence your investigation, so that during that process, you are able to know what are the evidentiary issues that I should factor in here. If they are basically hearsays, you know what is going to transpire.
So what you're trying to say, Mr. Eric, is when you don't have enough information, or you believe that the information is not solid enough, then you won't end up furnishing the court with that sort of information.
It's the work of an investigator to report the true state of the matter. So if the evidence is insufficient,
it is upon the discretion of the court to decide whether it is sufficient or not.
Even for the advocate to see how they can pursue the
matter. Mike, it sounds like you have something to add.
Yeah, but also based on time, let me be specific.
Yes.
Eric has done well. So the point is this: once you've done the investigation, your investigation report should stand even to the court, in the court of law, independently, even when you are not there. Why do I say that? It should even convince both the parties, even you are not there, that this is the process. So it is also upon them to argue based on their professionalism. And being that you are also a lawyer, and there was even a scenario, sometimes scenarios can also be where I've done the investigation, very proper investigation, I've given you the report, but maybe to the client was also giving the assignment when there is already court and there's already a case in the court, but they want just a supportive and evidence. And now I've already done the process and I've given you the investigation report, yet it is a draft report. So in the sense that this report is proper and you've gone to the court with the draft report, as a lawyer, I know you will smile, because there's no way the judgment and also the proceeding can be viewed or balanced with the draft report. And that is why, as a risk house and also with the trainings, we are always saying in the investigation report, even the clients, we are always advising that you must have the final investigation report, not draft. And at the same time, that one will help you. And that is why even Risk House, we are always doing the trainings for data protection, for fraud risk, services, cyber security, digital forensics, so that even the clients can also know all these things that they are always happening, because we are in a digital world. And also, we must also adhere and also adjust with the technology. So even to the viewers, come to Risk House. Risk House has the professionalism based on different principles. So we're able to help you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. I believe you've explained it in a language that we can all understand.
Yes.
Now there is a question which has been posed by one of the audience. What are the disposing factors of fraud and fraudsters? What are the predisposing factors of fraud and fraudsters?
Probably I can comment on that. There's something we call the fraud triangle. And from the fraud triangle, there are specific factors that come out that enable someone to undertake a fraudulent thing. One of it is pressure. We spoke about the financial statements earlier, and you find that in organizations, the management or the board, actually the board may put pressure on the management to have a certain result of the company's financials. So that's pressure. It may be pressure or undue pressure. So the management or the staff may tend to tweak the financials so as to give a certain representation or result. So there's pressure. There's also the aspect of rationalization. And when you talk about rationalization, there are people who are innate in nature or in their character. Their ethics have a predisposition of committing fraudulent activities without actually feeling anything. Yeah. So it can be in someone's character. And
someone's nature to defraud people.
Yes, when you actually get an opportunity to do that, you do it.
So it's always within someone.
Not all people, obviously, but it can be that rationalization. And then there's the aspect of opportunity. So when you're talking about opportunity, we have generally organizations should have internal controls or fraud internal controls. So where someone is maybe quick enough to identify that there are no sufficient internal controls within an organization, they may bypass the controls and then eventually be able to defraud the company. So as Michael has intimated, those are some of the things we do as risk house in terms of coming up with internal controls, the fraud risk assessment, fraud risk training, fraud risk programs, anti-fraud program to help organizations to mitigate these things.
Okay, that is well detailed, Faith. So how does the corporate world handle accidental fraudsters? Mr. Simon, how does the corporate world handle accidental fraudsters?
Accidental, that's a new term. But
it is, I believe.
I want to...
By accidental, I don't know what the person means, whether this person did not intend to become a fraud or to fraud a certain company or an individual. So I believe you're in a better position to elaborate on the same.
Yes. I will explain this closely tied to the fraud triangle, which has the three edges. Pressure, it's an unshareable financial need that is embarrassing. You don't want to share it with your colleagues or with your employer. Number two, comes in the opportunity to steal. You have been given responsibility of resources, assets, and you can steal them without somebody noticing at the time. The last one, of course, is the rationalization, trying to convince yourself that I never get a bonus, never get a salary increment, then give myself one by stealing, defalcating a resource of a company. And then I now come to the accidental fraudster. Organization will normally hire very clean people, go to the DCI, get a certificate of good conduct, zero criminal record. That has never even set up somebody, which is could have been an assault and recorded in the books of the DCI. They are clean.
So from our laws in Kenya, you can't really say that I became a fraudster accidentally.
The person was
intended to commit this type of fraud.
Yeah, but so
no, as long as you don't have a good conduct, you don't have a good conduct.
Yeah, but they come with a clean criminal record. Okay. So when you hire them, they get predisposed to this fraud triangle. If they are young people, they start going to, there's peer pressure. Every weekend they are hanging out, and they are spending a lot of money. They end up living beyond their means. Somebody goes to Naivasha on a weekend, uses all the salary. They haven't paid their rent. They haven't paid school fees if they have children. That will create financial pressure. Then they have the opportunity at work to steal. They make use of it. And of course, before they make use of it, they have to rationalize that they are not stealing. They are doing something, they are stealing, they will return. They are taking, they will return. That is an accidental fraudster because circumstances forced them to steal. They didn't come from out there and decide to steal from the organization. In my own understanding of the question, that's how I would answer.
So in their eyes, they did it accidentally, but in the eyes of the law, there's nothing like accidental, being an accidental fraudster. You are a fraudster, you are a fraudster in the eyes of the law.
Indeed.
Indeed. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Simon. I believe that brings us to an end of this webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you, our able speakers, for also sharing your knowledge with us here today. I believe then we should cut this short.